Yeah. One time they threatened to give me a bell to quiet everybody, but the bell was too loud too for me, and I just couldn't use it. Okay, so good morning everyone. How are we doing? Good. Dusted off the pollen, made it here. Okay, good. So 2-chapter week. Thanks for sticking with us on that. We'll be doing composting first, and we'll be doing lawns and turf and a little bit of lawn alternatives after the break. Everybody knows that for the plant sale this weekend that you can come and pre-shop on Friday at 2, if you like. That's tomorrow, which we're there.
Is it card cash?
Card preferred.
Okay.
Yeah. I think CAD will probably have change, but card is easy. And yeah. It'll be exciting. There's a lot of good stuff. If you are looking for what plants we have, it's on the Backyard Treasures plant sale website. If you can't make it this weekend, next weekend is the Briggs plant sale. That's kind of a fun one because it's all veggies all the time for the most part. And they also do a compost giveaway and they do some other events. So that's kind of a really fun event as well. So do we have any questions about either of those?
How do you do the compost giveaway? You bring your own?
They have bags. It's bagged.
Oh, they do. It's all bagged.
Mm-hmm. Just buy the. So yeah, that's a really fun event. And we will be. I love our enthusiasm, but just a little tiny bit. Yeah, thank you. And we will be touring Briggs soon, so you'll be getting some information about that. We'll be having a lunch, and so you'll be able to get to see Briggs. But if you can't make it for that tour, I'd especially recommend the Plant Festival out at Briggs, or the Spring Festival out at Briggs. All right, awesome. Moving right along. Okay, so I am actually just going to turn it over to Kathryn. Kathryn is, how long have you been a master gardener?
10 years.
Whoa, 10 years. Woo, that's awesome. So 10 years, she is our compost queen out at Briggs. She actually was the leader for our 2021 Search for Excellence Award, which was a research project out at Briggs. It's the tomato grafting project. That actually is an international Search for Excellence award that the Master Gardeners, like the big international group, gives out. So she led that, did a bunch of videos. So she is really kind of an expert on all things veggie and compost. Yeah, she is the person for that. So if you ever have any questions, reach out to Kathryn. She's great. She always is willing to have someone come out and learn with her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Always into it.
I'm out at Briggs Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings. The later it gets into the summer, the earlier I am out there.
Yes.
And I can always make an extra trip if somebody can't do Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday.
Yeah, I have learned so much from her, so it's always worth heading out just to pick her brain even a little bit.
Well.
So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Composting, why and how. So 10 years ago, I was at Briggs looking at this mess right here. And in my boldness, I said to the extension agent, who is the very kind Michelle Wallace, you know, this is a missed opportunity. We could be composting this. And Michelle said, okay. And for that conversation, I stand in front of you today. So be careful of what you volunteer for. So the defining thing about compost is that in its final stages, it no longer bears any resemblance to the pile from which it began. And so why do we compost? Well, first of all, we compost for the earth. If you look at this chart of municipal solid waste, it looks like paper and paperboard products are the biggest contributor. But when you combine yard and food waste, you see that that is really the biggest contributor to municipal waste. And food waste generates 58% of the fugitive greenhouse emissions. I love that word, fugitive. That's what escapes. And another statistics from the EPA, I did not make this up, is that greenhouse gas emissions from food is equal to that of 50 million gas-powered vehicles. I didn't make it up. So, what is compost? I have a couple of definitions here, and this one is that it's partially decayed organic matter that feeds plants, feeds the soil biology, and improves soil. And how does it do that? Well, first of all, it adds porosity to the soil, so it will lighten up clay soil, it'll give some heft to sandy soil. It facilitates the uptake of water. 5% addition of compost quadruples the soil's ability to hold water. And that means there's more space for roots and for soil organisms to grow and thrive. In terms of chemistry, pardon this is, I've taken an antihistamine, but I'm still going to be frogging here today. It provides your NKP, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, in a slow release form. So if you have compost in your bed, it's slowly releasing. Organically, it increases the productivity of plants, and it keeps soil biology neutral, making more elements available to plants. Some people say that it fights fungal infections, and I think, Ashley, you told me only 5% of your bed should be compost. Is that right?
Yeah, so in like landscape beds, if you strive for 5%, that's really good. In veggie beds, sometimes we're higher, but you do not. Compost is good, but it does not a more is always better situation.
Good. So, this is kind of the defining definition, and this is from Rhonda Sherman. Rhonda Sherman is really the queen of compost. She spent her entire career talking about compost, and particularly vermicompost, but her her definition is that it's a controlled process of converting organic materials into a valuable soil amendment under, and these are the key words, aerobic conditions using biologically generated heat. So anything will rot. Compost will speed up the process. There are a lot of composting styles. The one I'm most interested in is honey hole. But for some of these systems, you rely on anaerobic bacteria. For the continuous hot pile, which we're going to talk about, you rely on aerobic bacteria. And does everybody know the difference between the two? Okay, all right. Aerobic bacteria requires oxygen, and that's just a key part of what we're going to talk about today. So there are 4 pillars to hot composting, and in hot composting, our goal is to create an environment for microbes, an environment that microbes love, because microbes are decomposers. And the key components are, of course, organic matter. This is broken up into nitrogen and carbon. The carbon is the somewhat alive green stuff. Actually, the nitrogen is the somewhat alive green stuff. The carbon is the more or less dead brown stuff. And you'll see the interrelationship of carbon and nitrogen throughout this discussion. Water is useful for breaking down the material. Oxygen supports the aerobic bacteria. And temperature is important for killing pathogens and weeds, but it's even more important for creating a cozy environment for our microbes. That's the whole talk is about creating a cozy environment for our microbes. Heat is created as organisms feed on the matter and break that down into less complex modules. And if you just think about this, these microorganisms are demolishing the potato and excreting nitrogen. So it's a fabulous thought. When most people think about composting, they think about worms. And in actuality, worms are very late to the composting process. And here's another flash. They do not eat the watermelon. Worms eat microbes. Microbes eat watermelon. And of the 3 microbes that we're going to talk about in a minute, the favorite for worms are bacteria. But if you see any dirt, any soil with worms in it, you can be pretty sure it has a decent microbial balance. First people to the party are your macro decomposers. And these are physical decomposers. They're your millipedes, your spiders, your slugs. They grind, tear, and chew the material into smaller pieces, making it available for the microbes. While they are doing this, they create an excrement that feeds the bacteria. And you may ask how bacteria gets into a compost pile to begin with. Well, it's there already. This teaspoon of soil from my garden purportedly contains 30,000 different bacteria. And so now we're going to talk about the micro decomposers. These are, as I said, they're chemical decomposers. They convert organic matter into nutrients that the plants can use. And there are 3 types. The bacteria are the most populous. they're the smallest but the most plentiful. The fungi are a little bit bigger, and the actinidus seeds are just fun. I can't even go further than that. I'll tell you more about them in a minute. But we're going to start with aerobic bacteria. These are the workhorses of the compost pile. 80 to 90% of the organic matter in a compost pile are bacteria. These are the best decomposers because they're fast at it, and they can decompose the broadest variety of material. So back to the carbon-nitrogen story, they use carbon, that's their energy source, and they have to have carbon so they could keep on eating, and they use the nitrogen to make protein and to grow. So as they're eating, they create heat, and they're also constantly excreting nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and magnesium. And if I were talking to 5-year-olds, I'd say something like, the microbes go and eat the vegetables and poop out fertilizer. So bear that in mind. How fast do bacteria reproduce? In the ideal conditions, they can split into new identical bacteria every 20 minutes. So you think about creating that nice warm place for them and how that's going to help your compost pile. You don't want to think about this if you have a bacterial infection. So bacterial happiness. The happiness of various bacteria is directly related to how warm the pile is. At the first level, and so you don't need to remember all these names and the temperatures. I think what's important is that you understand what the process is and how the compost moves through the process. So at the lowest temperatures, you have your psychrophilic bacteria. And these aren't even on the chart here because they don't really decompose much, but their whole journey in life is to create enough heat so that the thermophilic bacteria come in. So when a compost pile gets to be about 70 degrees, it starts the decomposition. And a secondary purpose of the mesophilic, besides starting the decomposition, is to create more heat so the thermophilic bacteria can come in. And this will go through the process of mesophilic, then thermophilic, and in a relatively short time, the thermophilic will cool down. It works so efficiently, it kind of eats itself out of a job. And then you'll go back to the psychrophilic, and the choice is either to let the compost mature or to start it up again. So the second part of the second decomposer are the fungi. And once the bacteria have had their way with the pile, the fungi come in and break down material that the bacteria could not eat. Again, they may also produce chemicals to stop the growth of other microbes. They operate in the cooler temperatures. You'll usually find them on the outside of the pile, not that you can see them without a microscope. But they also take over in the final stages of composting, and they're really responsible for what we think of as compost or humus. Now these are my favorites because I just like saying the word actinomycetes. They look like they're fungi because of their filamentous appearance, but they're actually a higher form of bacteria. They work in moderate temperature zones, and they tackle, again, the toughest material to decompose, liberating more elements like carbon and nitrogen. And they're most evident in the final stages of composition. And I have a great show and tell here. I also take care of the vermicompost, and over the winter when it was cold, I stuffed it with cardboard thinking I was going to insulate it. I did, helped a lot. The other day when I took the cardboard out, I'll pass this around, at the soil level, eating cellulose, were actinomycetes. So that's and that's partly why they're my favorite, one of my favorites.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
We see that in mulch commonly. I see it.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's the mulch starting to break down.
Yeah, I was actually rooting around at the garden at Briggs, and I picked up a piece of mulch, and there it was again. It was just too tiny to bring in. But yeah. And that's the only of these mini decomposers that you could see. Everything else is microscopic. All right, so now that we know how to decompose a pile, how do we build a pile and make it work? Because of the way microbes use carbon and nitrogen, it's a balancing act of green nitrogen and brown carbon. In the ideal world, you would have a ratio of 2-to-1 carbon to nitrogen. If you look into this, it's a real rabbit hole, trying to figure out how much carbon is in a mushroom and what that's relationship is to nitrogen. What I would say about this is if you're composting long enough, you're going to get the feeling of whether or not your greens and browns are in balance. If you have too much browns, the process slows down. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. If you have too much greens, you get into a goopy, sloppy, wet, ammonia-smelling mess. Surface area is important. You want to chop your material as much as possible, again, to liberate the inside for the microbes. And the more variety you have in your compost pile, the more diversity you'll have in terms of microbes. So working with organic material is water, which aids in decomposition, and you're looking to get 40 to 60% moisture in your bed. You know you're there when you can take a clump of the soil and it will clump but not drip out water. Some people say it's akin to a more or less dry sponge. You don't want an excess of water because oxygen then will not flow through, and the aerobic bacteria need the oxygen. You also need oxygen to feed the bacteria, and the way to get it into the pile is to stir the pile, to churn the pile, or to flip the pile, and I'll show you a technique I used over at Briggs. Again, right-sized chopping is important. Try to get a different variety of sizes so that air can flow through. And whereas you'd want to chop your vegetables, you would not want to put them in a blender and make a slurry because, again, the oxygen won't move through. When it comes to heat, heat does not break down the material. It just creates a happy environment for the microbes. At 130 degrees, your compost pile will begin to kill pathogens, and this is just about 130. That was from Briggs a couple of years ago. At 140, it'll kill weeds. 150 is the sweet spot, and if you get to 160, you start to sterilize the soil and kill your microbes. There is another way to handle pathogens and weeds, and that is to keep them out of the compost. So nothing diseased at Briggs goes to our compost.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you are noticing that you're getting to 160 degrees, how do you slow that down?
You churn it, stir it, put some air in it, just break it up a little bit. I've never, have you gotten to 160?
No.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Because I don't compost, I cold compost.
I think this is the highest I've ever gotten it, and that was with a pretty big pile. So what are greens, what are browns? Some of the greens are pretty obvious. Any green vegetation, grass clippings. Coffee grounds are brown, but they're a great source of nitrogen. If you're going to use eggs and crustacean shells, you want to chop them up. They take a long time to break down. Herbivorous manure, you want to let it sit for a while in case those cows ate some weeds and weed seeds. You want them to be dead before you put it in your compost pile. Browns, again, are pretty self-explanatory for a lot of them. Cardboard is a great brown. These bags from Amazon are fabulous because they go through your shredder really easily and start to break down the material. Some things that you might not think about are the old cereal and crackers that are going stale in my pantry at least. Nutshells are perfectly acceptable unless they're walnut shells because there's a chemical in that actually kills plants. Bulkier materials will create more air for yourself. If you're going to use wood, ash, use it sparingly, very sparingly. Now, this is a very brief discussion of the carbon-nitrogen ratio. And again, it's a deep rabbit hole. But basically, every organism is composed of some carbon and some nitrogen. And some organisms are more heavily weighted to carbon. And so, to carbon. So what that means is if you are more heavily weighted to carbon, it's going to take more of your nitrogen to decompose it. So if you look at the simple example of leaves, maple leaves have 30-to-1 carbon ratio, oak leaves have 60-to-1. So the maple leaves are going to break down faster with less nitrogen. If you have oak leaves, you're going to have to add a lot more veggies to it. A few things to avoid: meat, fish, dairy, bones. They take a long time to decompose. They're prone to attract rodents. You would not want to put your cat litter in the compost pile. Contents of your old expired cans are fine unless they're starting to swell up, because that means you have botulism in them, potential for botulism, and I just told you how fast bacteria can multiply. Veggie stickers are not compostable. Pine needles are, but they're hard to compost because they have a waxy coating on them. If your pile is running slow, you can kickstart it with some bone meal or some blood meal, or again, you could clean out your pantry with old molasses, sugar, soft drink, and old dog food. Building the pile. In the ideal situation, you want your compost pile to be 1 cubic yard. So 3 feet horizontal, 3 feet vertical, no, 3 feet wide, 3 feet long, and 3 feet high. That is not always possible. You want it to touch the earth, which means you don't want to put it on a pallet or put it on a piece of plastic. You want to get those microbes that are in the earth working for you. I call this a lasagna layering mix, ideally starting with some twigs to allow air to get into the compost pile. Brown, green, brown, green, brown, green, always some water when it looks dry, always some little stir of oxygen. And this is one way to build a compost pile. The other one is to take your browns and your greens and mix them together, and I'll show you where that works the best. You also want to be sure you cover it with a thick layer of carbon so that your food, veggies, etc. is not exposed. So, this is a little bit of a humbling story, but this was the pile at Briggs on Saturday. Now, we have always used a 2 or 3 pile system. So to make a compost pile, it gets hot, it gets cold, and then we start another compost pile. And we use the first one to kind of inoculate the new one, and it also is our carbon. We don't have a lot of leaves at Briggs. It's very strange with a lot of pine trees, but not a lot of leaves. So we're often looking for carbon, so therefore the cardboard and the soil. So over here, I got to click again. No. Oh, so over here on the left is our older pile. On the right is one that had just been started a week or so before. But you could see what's wrong with the one on the left. It may be rotting, but it's definitely not cooking. So nonetheless, when I dug into the pile, it was a little warm and there were worms. So it did have some good microbial activity going for it. It just wasn't, we just weren't maximizing the microbes.
When you say obviously it's not cooking, is that because of the temperature, or is there something else that you
Exactly.
Okay.
It's at the very lowest level for any composting activity. Yes?
And where do you do the temperature in the pile?
I usually stick in a couple different places.
Okay.
And this is a new thermometer I bought. It's fabulous. The minute the temperature goes up, that dial swings over. Yeah.
How deep do you have to
Oh, I put it as far as it'll go.
Okay.
I think it's about 12 inches. They have them 18 inches. But when that pile is hot, the thermometer knows it's hot.
Even if you're just at the surface. You want to get in there.
You want to get it in
You
there.
don't have to get like all the way in.
No. I mean, you want to get it, I guess, below the first 3 or 4 inches. And so the situation being what it was, I figured on Saturday it was time to build a new compost pile. And this is yours truly cutting up weeds with a hedge trimmer. We find a hedge trimmer to be really good at reducing material. So you can see what's in here, veggies donated from some of our gardeners. Over here is a collard that has gone to bulk. And I literally went around the garden and picked weeds that didn't have flowers or didn't have seeds. Chop them up, and This is what we got, and we put it on top of that second pile. That second pile already had a base of carbon, so we added this nitrogen to it. And because I could, I added a layer of coffee grounds. And if you don't know this, you could go to most, if not many, Starbucks, and at the end of the day, or several times during the day, they will give you a huge bag of coffee grounds. So it's a great source of nitrogen if you're low on it. Gave it some water, obviously, and then I aerated it. And I had not tried this aerating method before, but it was fabulous. You could use a broom handle, you could pick it apart with a pitchfork or one of those ground tillers that loosens up the earth. I took a piece of rebar that I had in my bed, I poked it into the pile 4 or 5 times and just wiggled it. And I know I got air in it, and after the rain I probably got water in it. So this was Saturday at about 10 o'clock. Oh, forgot. The pile was only about 18 inches tall. And this is what it looked like at the end with my nice bit of carbon on top of it. And this is the story of that compost pile. The day I put it in, it was 52 degrees, not quite at the psychrophilic level. I went back 24 hours later, and it had hit 60 degrees, was pushing the mesophilic era. And then 72 hours after I started, it had hit the thermophilic era. And so when I say it's ideal to have a pile that's 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, you could do it in a smaller compost, a smaller pile. The trick is balancing the elements, getting your oxygen in there and just balancing it. Now I went back today, and the temperature had fallen to 100 degrees. So the thermophilic phase is over, and it's starting to cool down again, which means anybody wants to come on Saturday, we'll be resuscitating it. Where to put your pile? You want to put it on a level spot because you don't want runoff water, getting it all wet. Ideally, you want to put it near water so you can moisten it when you have to. You want to put it away from your house. And in terms of pile styles, there are really not that many. There is your single pile and then your 2 or 3 part pile. So this pile style is excellent. This one, first one on the left here, is excellent for when you just want to mix things together, when you don't want to lasagna layer them. And you can see that has pallets on the outside of it and very easy to turn to get your oxygen in. This one is a lasagna style in a basket. The good thing about it is you can have plenty of water, plenty of air. I think that would be a bear to turn. Yeah. If you have enough room, this 3-part system, it really works for us at Briggs. Get it started, use it to inoculate the next pile, maybe start a 3rd pile, and by that time your first pile is starting to compost pretty well. Now, I have taken this page from Rhonda Sherman. Rhonda Sherman has said she has had a compost discovery exposition at her compost place for 35 years. And I can say this almost unilaterally, she hates just about all of these. And her comments about them are sometimes they're flimsy, sometimes they have too many parts, sometimes they have the holes in the wrong place. If the holes are on top, you're going to get air in, but you might also get more water in that you want to have. How big is the place where you take out your compost? I had a picture and I lost track of it, but it was a picture of a woman with a garden trowel shoveling her compost into a clay pot. Well, that's not going to work for a lot of people. You really want it more than that. The alternative is to take your little bin thing off and wreck your compost pile. So she is definitely against those. And I will tell you that, and it's not to say you shouldn't buy them, but if you're going to buy them, think about what they're doing and how they're constructed and what that means to the overall balance of your compost pile. I personally have had one of these, this green thing here, It was an absolutely miserable existence. It had holes on the top, yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt,
Sorry.
but just to add, I'm more of an urban gardener. I live right in town, so I don't have the space for a larger compost. And I got the bin that, first of all, I believe Wake County was giving out free, and I just noticed this year Durham County's also giving out.
Coming up. Coming up.
They're coming up? Okay. Well, I will just share at some point, some tricks of, I've been using that for about 6 years, so.
Okay, so do you want to do that now?
Yeah, all I'll just say is, it does have a very small opening.
Uh-huh.
Not at all useful,
Right.
but once, I have a small garden and a small yard, and so just every so often, for me, it's usually, honestly, just once or twice a year, I have a grater that you can buy that fits over my wheelbarrow, and I dump big chunks of it into that, and it separates out the parts that have not been decomposed yet from the parts that are lovely, beautiful black gold. And then I store that in big 5-gallon buckets until I use it. And so I just do, it's a much smaller process because I am just a little urban garden, but it works well.
Okay.
Doing it that way.
So just to finish on the green thing, water came in the top, soaked all the material in it, clogged the holes at the bottom so nothing drained out. It was impossible to turn. But Rhonda does have recommendations. She's very big on the earth machine because of the way it's constructed, decent opening. A successor to the earth machine is the free garden earth. And if you are intent on composting bones and meat, you need to have the green cone. The bones and meat go in the basket and that gets buried under the earth. For somebody who has a little bit more room and wants a little more structured 3-bin system, she recommends the compost Knox. And here's the story about compost bin availability. Durham, unfortunately, is closed for this year. You had to register by the end of March. Orange County has the green bin, and it looks to me like you can just call them and ask for one any time of year. The bargain of the century is the countertop food waste bin for $5. I have bought several of these and they were much more than $5. Wake County has their bin sale in May. And then this was something I found on the Durham website, this Compost Here. It's relatively new. It's part of Durham's waste reclamation site. It's an app. This company, Compost Now, puts little bins in strategic places right now, I think in Wake and Durham County. You pull up the app, put your zip code in, and it will point to you where the bins are and whether they're open, the green ones, or whether they're full. You can take every single piece of food there, meat, bones, eggs, including the dreaded pizza box. They do not accept any other kind of recycling. And I will say to you that it's a great idea. I'm not sure yet it's fully formed. I have a little trouble navigating the phone app, but it's something to keep your eye out and to look out for. Yes?
Can I put a plug in too? There's another app called Make Soil. Have you
Sure.
heard of this one? It's a similar concept, but it connects you with people in your community who have compost bins that are looking to accept food. So also if you all have compost and want other people's food waste, you can register yourself as a site. One thing that I really like about it is it's free. I've used it while traveling and it creates community. So I had a lady come by yesterday, we had a really nice chat about life, and off she goes with a new bin, and I got her food waste and compost.
Say again what it is?
Make Soil.
Make soil.
Make Soil. There used to be one called Share Waste, but they shut it down. Make Soil is coming up.
Okay, good, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, now,
I have a question about the green
Yeah.
cone.
about the what?
The green cone.
Yes.
So are you supposed to? Because it talks about how it like releases nutrients from that basket into the soil around it. Are you intended to kind of like move it around then in different holes to kind of spread the nutrients, or?
I don't know, but probably not a bad idea. I mean, the whole benefit for me, probably would be easier to just dig out the composted stuff and move the composted stuff rather than move the green cone. I don't truly know the answer to that.
Oh, okay. I thought I looked on their website and it made it sound like it doesn't actually have like it doesn't result in like a compost at the bottom. It releases everything into the soil. Like most of it is released as water or gases into the soil.
You know more than I do on this.
Oh, okay.
I just know that if you want to compost meat, that's what you do.
Okay, fair
Or
enough.
you take it to make soil or someplace. Okay. I also run the vermicomposting pile at Briggs. 2 seconds on this. What you do is you create a worm-friendly environment, little moisture, and you do that with some soil or a little bit of vermicompost, lots of shredded cardboard, and some water. Then you introduce microbes. This is my this is my weekly kitchen waste, and my life would be so much easier if I didn't have to stop every meal and save my vegetables. And that gets buried into the compost bin, and the microbes come, the worms eat the microbes, and they poop out good fertilizer. The worms you use are Eisenia fetida, called red wigglers, red worms. You cannot use your fishing worms, you cannot use your garden worms. The reason you use this is because they are good composters, number one. Number two, they are very adaptable to different temperatures. Now, one of the issues when you have a worm farm, and this is just a cool side story here, is that you have to collect the vermicompost, and then you use it in your garden. I've used it for several years. I find that it makes my plants stronger. I'm not sure that it makes them more productive, but the plants are definitely stronger. But you have to separate the worms from their compost. There are a couple of ways to do it, and this is definitely the most fun. This is a food bag, like onions or something came in. I filled it with good composting stuff. I buried it back into the compost pile, and within hours, I had worms crawling in it. So the thing to do then was when it feels full enough, just take the bag and put it in the new compost pile and transfer the worms that way. Worm bins, they could be as simple as do it yourself, as fancy as this tower here. Going back to this gentleman's question, these 2 bins over here, the Vigo garden, the white one, and the sub pot next to it, are designed to sit in your garden. And the Vigo is only $40. My niece has the catalog of the industry, the sub pod. You put your worms in it, make a bed for them, put your worms in, then feed them. And the worms do exactly what you said. They go in and out of the sub pod. And she said that the veggies around the sub pod were definitely better than the veggies further out. So that's that. Oops. And this is for your radar screen. In case somebody asks you about it. Suddenly this is all over the place. It's an anaerobic fermentation, does not require oxygen. I have not gone down the rabbit hole because it's totally different than anything we've learned here. I'm just letting you know in case somebody asks for it. Great for people who live in an apartment and aren't able to have a bin outside their backyard. Does meat, dairy, and eggs. Apparently is more rich in nitrogen than our composting process that I just described. But it actually ferments the vegetables, so they don't look composted, they just look fermented. And it creates a product that is described as a pre-composted product that you would take and put in your compost bin. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Just a few thoughts about troubleshooting compost problems. They're on your handout. And honestly, it's almost always a question of balance. The pile is too small, you have not enough water, you have too much water, you have not enough oxygen, you have too much brown, not enough green. And this sheet will just give you a few symptoms, just explain what the problem is and give you your solution. And aside from a bibliography, I'm done. Questions? Yes, gentlemen.
Can you describe what happens to yard waste that gets picked up by the Durham sanitation department? Do they convert that to a compost that's used someplace, or what happens to it?
My inclination is to say yes, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I do believe at some point at Briggs we got compost from Durham, but I'm not 100% sure, I'm sorry.
Hey, Quinn, when I first did it, the idea was people would be able to go get compost, and they put it in, if you ever drive through the waste center, drive back in there, there's a humongous pile where they've got it. But the problem was they couldn't control what people put in it.
Right.
And then, so people put things they shouldn't put in there, and people try to put it in the garden, especially, and then nothing grew. So, yeah, so it's
So
there.
I guess my question is,
Yeah.
should I feel guilty about putting my leaves and things like that in there? Because I don't wanna deal with compost.
Yeah,
frankly.
no, I think,
It's, to me, it's a better choice than just putting it in the landfill. At least they have a place that's just like a big, composting it, whether at some point in time it might be used for somebody to use it. But
I think somebody here has an answer. Courtney?
Oh, I would love to take your leaves. But probably it brings you the same issue, like leaves to a composter are always in short supply. So one of the ladies who brings me food waste also brings me her bag of leaves. And if you've ever, I highly encourage anybody else who's interested in composting to just like take other people's leaves. Like
Well,
I'm
I
that creepy
typically
lady
put
taking
my
leaves.
leaves just on my garden beds,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I have all this pruning stuff. I have a growing brush pile. I don't know any way to grind it up or do anything with that, so.
Well, I think that's better than putting it in a landfill. Eventually, it will decompose. When I lived in New York, I had a lot of leaves. At the end of the winter, I'd pile them all together, and throughout the year, I would throw out vegetable things, and it rotted. The same thing we had a pile with weeds at Briggs. I didn't want them in the compost pile. I said, just put them here. By the end of the year, we had some kind of soil. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and my impression of what they're doing with yard waste and that kind of stuff is like, I don't know if you've ever been to the dump to drop off yard waste, but like you can, small truck is the ultimate gardening accessory, right? So you load up the truck, you take everything out there, and you just dump it, and it's these big piles that are huge. And I think they're working with, I forget the name of the compost company, but they're definitely doing large scale composting out there. I don't know if it's to this degree, and they're not typically selling that product. I think they're basically taking it back into larger scale operations where it might be used for mulch, it might be used for amendments, but like I definitely think it's getting back into basically a landscape product, and they're just processing it all out there. I think, like someone was saying, they just can't sell it because who knows when to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
I think they work with McGill. It's the
Yeah,
same.
yeah.
If you get compost now and you get the
Yeah.
compost from them. Also for the prunings, you should look into a dead hedge. They are fantastic, especially for smaller, like it's maybe neater than a brush pile, where you just kind of put like posts up and you can just stuff them in. It's like a fence alternative. So it's nice and tidy. And then weeds, like if you put them by the road, like if you write like pesticide free or something on them, someone will gather them. So I echo Courtney's.
I would,